One of the things that can make life miserable is to get stuck in a difficult moment and not be able to see anything beyond that. It can be like we're stuck in bad weather, like those 30 or 40 days it seemed we had no sunshine this winter. I just want to kill myself, I heard. Or it can be stuck in anything else, like some difficult, torturous feelings that we're having. Or a situation in our relationship, a close one, with a spouse or a good friend, in which things are not going right, and you can't see anything beyond it. It's just the way it is, and it's going to be. There's no vision beyond there. That's very miserable. Or it can be that we've had a really great experience, and we think this is the way life should be. And then when we find that it's not, we come down from that experience, we think something's terribly wrong. And of course there isn't, because life has its highs and it has its lows and a whole lot of time in between those. Is that right? So, it's good not to get stuck in the unpleasant present moment. In the gospel today, we have the picture of a very high moment for Peter, James, and John, as well as for Jesus, because they went up the high mountain. Now, we need some context for this passage, because in Luke's gospel, this comes right after Jesus has predicted his own passion and death and then resurrection. And then he turns to his disciples and says, unless you take up your cross. We're not talking about that pretty little thing you wear around your neck as a jewelry. We're talking about a torture instrument. Unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Okay, that's kind of a downer. Now they take him up to the mountain. About 8 days later, Scripture says, and they get to see this vision of Jesus who becomes dazzling white. And they see Jesus with Moses and Elijah. It's like, wow, this is a great scene. We want to stay here. Let me build 3 tents, okay? Well, Jesus says, well, he doesn't say it, but he does it. It's like, no, we're not staying here. But then, because the mountain experience isn't where we live our life. We live it mostly down plains. So then they hear this voice come from God and says, this is my chosen son. Listen to him. And you might go on to say, listen to him because you're going to need to know what he has to say in order to live your life once you come down this mountain, because there are going to be some tough times ahead. Listen to him. Then it says, they fell silent. There's a key. In order to listen, we got to stop talking. Sometimes people just talking, like it said in the gospel about Peter, says he didn't know what he was saying. We just talk. Zip it. Stop talking. They fell silent. They fell silent. We need to have some silence in our lives in order to be able to listen. And the first part of the silence, the top layer, is to get rid of the noise we have in our life, at least some of it. I know there's some people who go to bed with the TV and they wake up with the radio and it's noise all day long. They turn on the radio on the way to work. They got the TV on. As soon as they come home, there's always noise. And there's never any time for silence in life. And without that kind of silence, we don't get to hear. It said in that second reading, it says, their minds were occupied with earthly things. Okay, our minds need to be occupied with some earthly things in order to live and to get things done. But this lies preoccupied, totally occupied with all sorts of stuff that we don't need to be occupied with. And furthermore, we get kind of occupied with the messages of our culture. And I'm afraid to say that we have adopted enough of our present culture that doesn't quite square with the gospel. And we just kind of get sucked into our culture. And some of it isn't good. Am I making this up? All right. So that's why we need to listen. To stop the noise from our culture, the noise that comes into our ears when we go walking, we put in the iPods. There's nothing wrong with that. Make sure we have time for some silence and to listen. And then we listen more deeply, more profoundly, on a profound level. And we listen to because God speaks to us. This is my son, listen to him. And God speaks to us through our own experience of life, through our own hearts. So we need to take some time to listen, to let our hearts hear, open our minds. And, sometimes, would you agree, life can be silence can be deafening. Try to go home today, just sit down, put your timer on your watch, close your eyes, put your timer on your watch for 2 minutes. See how long it feels. Silence. What am I going to do with it? And then he speaks to us in our own hearts, and that's how we get in touch with that. And maybe in our silence we find out that, it's not everybody else who's wrong. But sometimes I've made some mistakes, and we begin to feel that. Maybe some true guilt. False guilt I got no time for, but true guilt. Instead of saying to somebody, everybody else's fault, I did that, I was wrong, I need to claim it. I need to go to confession because it's coming down on me, and I realize there's things I need to change about my life. We also might hear positive things, like God say, I know you. I formed you in the womb. You are my child. You belong to me. We need to hear that too, in our own silence, in our own hearts. That's how God speaks to us. It's one way. Another way is that he speaks to us through other people. And sometimes it's a message we don't want to hear because the gospel isn't what we always live out. And we might hear some things that make us a little uncomfortable, at least, if not mad. One of the spiritual works of mercy says that to admonish the sinner, to say, no, that's wrong. That is racist, what you just said. And they might get blow up and everything else. Okay, but I'm just telling you, that's racist. It's not Christian. And in silence, when we hear that, if we hear it, we just might begin to see, that's an area in my life that I better look at. Because it's not gospel. Sometimes it's hard to hear then that stuff which says we're not perfect yet. And also in that same spot is that sometimes we don't hear what's good. That we are good. And people say that to us and we just don't accept it. I know that to be true because there are many times I've experienced going up to somebody else and say, thanks, you did a really good job with that project, with that meeting. You did a good job. And I get this in return. Yeah, right. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what's in that person that keeps them from accepting the truth about how good they are, about a good job they've done? What is their self-image like? So when I give that compliment and somebody says, yeah, right, I will typically say, and you're welcome. And if I do that enough, next compliment I give that person, and they'll say, thank you, trying it out, and I'll say, you're welcome. You need to hear the positive as well to confirm the vision of God within us that we are living out. That's the second thing. The third thing is this. We can listen to God even more directly, not through things like it that go on here at Mass, through the Scripture. Listen to them in Scripture. And you get both of those things. The good news. The good news of what we do right and the good news that we can do it a whole lot better. And sometimes we'll come to church and we'll hear something and this will just kind of sit with us for a few days, if not the whole week. Or maybe we might hear something in a homily. It happens to me a lot that I hear it in music. I remember I was having a particularly tough time in my life some years ago. I was praying before Mass, and the choir was practicing the song, Be Not Afraid. And it just hit me. I thought, why don't I trust God more? Why am I afraid? And that song stuck with me for many days into the week. God's speaking to us, but we need to listen. We need to listen because God has a greater vision for us than typically we have for ourselves. And then they fell silent. Good idea. To listen to the vision that God has for us. Begin to see the vision of Jesus Christ and where he will lead us.